Good morning, sixth grade. I hope all of y'all had a happy Easter. I want to go over a few things for you for this week. One, I got most of your tests in from prior to Easter. Most of the grades were good on those, so good for you. However, I am still missing a number of tests. If you're someone who has not gotten in there and got those tests sent to me, please do so immediately, and I will be contacting you individually on those. Let's see, for the upcoming week, we have a Zoom review on Thursday. That will be at 1 o'clock will be your time for that. I'll send you the code. It should be the code from the same code as last time. But I will be sending that to you. We do have a test on Friday on this on what we're going to be covering here today in your sections with notes, which will be on the Japanese Empire. So please keep that in mind. Also, coming up, we'll get through the test on Friday. I'm going to assign a paper for y'all to do. You can pick any event, any person, or it could be a place, out of the chapter that we've studied. To do the paper on. Pretty much the same format. Please remember to use two sources that you've done on these papers before. Those will be due, I'll probably make them due the following Friday, or really you'll have till the following Sunday to turn those in. So that would be, you'd be looking at the 26th of April to have those turned in. So let's try to get through the chapter this week, have some good tests on Friday, and move forward from there. Once again, your Zoom meeting will be Thursday at 1 o'clock. All right, we talked last time about three different major Muslim empires. We also discussed the Chinese empire. We're going to discuss in this section the Japanese empires. From the time. So in the 14 and 1500s, Japan had experienced times of, I guess, turmoil is the way your notes have it, but just unrest. And at the time, the way they were set up, they were daimyos. You'll see that word there. That's how you say it. Controlled their own lands, and these people controlled their own lands and waged war against their neighbors, as feudal lords did in Europe. And we've talked about feudalism. So it was set up a little bit like that. Japan did have an emperor, but the emperor really only performed religious duties. Did not have, I guess, what you consider political power to unify the country. But the man came along, Oda Nobunaga. He was the first military to begin unifying the warring daimyos. He was using the military to unify the country, and his personal seal read to bring the nation under one sword, one leader, so they weren't split up and divided. They wouldn't have called tribes, but almost like tribes where they're not really unified. And of course, as I point out a lot of times in our lessons, usually somebody wants to be talking about unification of a country under one ruler. The person talking about that is seeing themselves as that ruler, and this wouldn't be any different. So in 1568, Nobunaga led his army against the capital city of Kyoto, and after a 10-year siege, that's a long time, that's a long siege, he won and became the most powerful man in the country. And then now he had the power militarily to force the issue to unify the people, and is so often the case historically. That's typically done with force or threat of force. So he did succeed in that. But in 1582, he was murdered by a treacherous soldier. Anytime you're in the position of power, especially the way power was gained here, it is always a dangerous thing. So Nobunaga does wind up getting murdered, and that's generally power only shifts hands at a death in these type of situations. But the power then shifted to who was considered his best general at the time, my pronunciation of these I've worked on. I hope these are close, but Toyotomi Hideyoshi was the name. I have that name in your notes. And he disarmed the peasants so they could not become warriors or threaten his rule. And he invaded Korea to expand Japan's power. This actually failed. The invasion of Korea was not a successful one. But going back to disarming the peasants, they did not want to. He in power. He didn't want to have anybody threaten his rule. An armed populace. If they turned against him, this is not uncommon. We see typically when governments, especially tyrannical governments or leaders, take over a government, if the people happen to be armed, they want them disarmed. And that's why, because they want them to be more easily controlled. So this isn't an unusual move that he does. But the other part of that, invading Korea, thinking I'm expanding empire, I'm showing my strength, I can take territory, whether it's strategic or just to show that we can. This winds up failing though. I do have the part about that in your notes. But after his death in 1598, Tokugawa Ieyasu assumes power, and he really kind of completes the work of unification. And you have there the battle that he defeats the last of his opponents in 1600, Sekigahara, the Battle of Sekigahara. And you'll need to know that battle, the name of that battle. But he defeats the last of his opponents, and this just sort of completes or solidifies unifying Japan. And then he was named shogun by the emperor several years later. And shogun, the term, just basically becomes a military dictator. So he has absolute authority now. And he set up his government headquarters at the fishing village of Edo, which is present-day Tokyo. All right, so you'll need to know that. And the Tokugawa family ruled for the next 250 years. So his rule did last a good way, but some of the terms in there you'll need to know. You'll need to know shogun. All right, and the Tokugawa family and a select group of daimyos controlled the government. And these were people, obviously, he was going to choose people when it's a select group, if it's family, or if these other people that he feels like he can trust, has loyalty to him, to the family, and that's the way it was set up. These are the people going to make the decisions, and they made up the Council of Elders, which was the leading administrative body. Council of Elders is a term that is in your notes, and you'll need to know that. Once again, that's not unusual either. People taking over, they want people around them they can trust. Under Tokugawa rule, the Japanese had 4 social classes. At the top were the samurai, including the daimyos, who held all political power. They alone could hold symbols of authority, such as a sword and a distinctive top knot in their hair. I'm sure y'all have seen movies depicting the samurai warriors, and you see how they have the knot, the way their hair is tied back right here. Number 2 in that would be the farmers, because they were the major food producers. The artisans, because they made goods. And really kind of at the bottom, or the people that were looked down the most, were the merchants. This is a little different than some of the social classes that we've studied, because the merchants were at the bottom of society because they exchanged goods as opposed to producing something, and that's the way they were viewed. They weren't viewed very highly, whether they had money or not. Typically, when we're doing the social classes, usually the poor peasants or whatever, the laborers, were at the bottom in many societies. But this was different. Of course, the samurai being the top, it was very militaristic thinking, warrior type mentality. And it was very rigid structure. No one can change his social class or perform tasks that another class that really was supposed to be done by another class. So very, very strict with that. And the Tokugawa ethics place loyalty to the shogun above the family. Okay. Now this once again, this isn't unusual amongst leaders, dictators. Once again, the shogun's military dictator, essentially, that they want loyalty to them above anything else. So even above your family, we would think that, well, it's not something we would view positively when you're talking about, I'm going to view my loyalty to a particular political leader over my loyalty or my love for my family. But that was what was taught. Once again, that's not unusual. And then duty and honor became the central values of society. Your duty and your honor, well, to the state, to the shogun. So this was very big thing for them. They did wind up having contacts with the West. With Western people. We're gonna talk more about that in the next little clip. But some of the names in here you'll recognize, like Magellan. We study Magellan's voyages and how he came in contact with the people of the Philippines, which is where he wound up being killed. But we're going to talk more about that in the next section. So we'll see you then. You should have the notes once again, and your grades from your tests should be in Gradebook Wizard. All right.